Hey guys, Tony here. So in this video, I'm going to show you a brew day, me trying to brew up a traditional Norwegian farmhouse ale using Kveik yeasts, using 5 different strains. In this video, I did sort of, you know how sometimes you're talking and the words that come out of your mouth are not necessarily what you're thinking about? I did get some of the numbers messed up in this video, and so I did try and correct that with some subtitles, so please forgive me for that. Also in this video, when it comes to talking about Norwegian farmhouse ales, I will link down in the description some information for you to go and look at, specifically Lars Marius's blog, who has written a book about Norwegian farmhouse ales. Unfortunately, it's only written in Norwegian, but don't let that stop you from looking more into Norwegian farmhouse ales if that's the sort of thing that interests you. It's sort of very interesting in that for a country this small, you have a wide variety of different traditions, but they all have very similarities in the way that they went about brewing this beer, and that's sort of one of the things that I found fascinating. You have people who do like no boil beers, and then you have people that do very sort of different techniques along the lines. The one sort of join-in factor in these beers is that they use juniper branches in order to brew this beer for this specific style. So I was able to obtain some juniper branches from a colleague of mine, Kirsty. Kirsty was kind enough to share with me some juniper branches that she was able to obtain from her cabin around the area of Hemsedal, and shared that with me. So I got back a nice bag that I was able to use up, and I'll show you that in the video. Okay, so when it comes to tradition, the tradition that I tried to say sort of in line with, or at least use as a guideline, was in Lars Marius's blog. He has a story about brewing in Morgedal. I'll go ahead and link to that down in this description, and then the idea is that they'll actually add strike water, cold strike water, to the mash the night before. They'll let the grains soak overnight, and then the next day they add even more hot water from the tap, and then they'll light the fire underneath the kettle and bring it up to 62 degrees Celsius for the first step of the mash. And then they'll let that go for a period of time, and then they'll step up to 70 degrees for another long period of time, and then they'll mash out at 78 degrees Celsius. So I tried to mirror that as best as I could in my system. No problems, that was okay. One thing that I did differently as well is, they'll create the juniper branches infusion. I believe that happens overnight and then throughout the day as well. I tried to closely mirror that in my HLT, so I had stuffed all the juniper in the HLT, and it is basically steeped for about 5 or 6 hours, and I'll show you that in the video as well. Very, very interesting. In addition to that juniper, I put some underneath the false bottom in the mash tun, so that as I was doing a continuous throughout the duration of the mash, that was being infused into the mash at the same time. I didn't find that that was very effective. You know, when I tasted the wort straight up, you know, from first run-ins, I couldn't actually taste any of the juniper in the wort. Coming from the HLT through the wort, I could get a little bit more. Another thing about tradition is that some of the farmers will actually use hops and some of them don't. Some of them will use them throughout the boil, just like we would with a normal brew, but some of them will actually use only hops at the very end as their sparging or post-sparge going into the fermenters. So there's some variation there. Me, I decided to go ahead and add hops directly into the boil like I normally would at 60 minutes, 30 minutes, and 15 minutes. But I was targeting very, very low IBUs. I was using Strisselspalt pellet hops, And for that, they're very, very low alpha, 2.1 I believe. So I got a total of 13 IBUs out of this beer. You'll see I've made some changes to the recipe throughout the brew day, so expect some changes. It was very sort of ad hoc, get a feel for this beer, get a feel for what it should be like, and it was a little bit sort of borrow a little from here, a little from there, and such is the way traditions are born. So yeah, I did try and use science throughout it, so I did take pH readings. I did add a little bit of salt additions. Yeah, just trying to do the best that I can in order to help the yeast out have a happy, healthy fermentation. And that's basically what the focus of this video is really to see what the yeast bring to this beer. And that's what I did. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the video and we'll come back after. Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be trying to brew up a traditional Norwegian farmhouse ale, otherwise referred to as a gourd ale. It's basically going to be made up of a juniper tree branch infusion, and yeah, it's going to be a very simple recipe, so let me go ahead and show you that real quick. Okay, so here's the recipe. This one, it's going to be very simple. It's going to be about 45% pale malt, 45% Pilsner malt, and 10% Munich 1. It's a light Munich. And I'm going to be using Strisselspalt for the hops on this one. Targeting very low IBUs. You can see it's only going to be an ounce at 90 minutes, an ounce at 30, and then half an ounce at 15 minutes. And that's pretty much it. I still have to fill in the rest because it's all part of a semi-ad hoc day. Okay, so very simple recipe, and then basically what I'm going to be doing with the juniper branches is putting them inside the HLT and infusing the water with them for a given period of time. Then I'm also going to be taking some of these branches and putting them into the bottom of the HLT underneath the false bottom, so that they will act as sort of a secondary filter underneath, again, that false bottom underneath the grain, and constantly infusing the wort as it's recirculating in my system that I do throughout the duration of the mash. Now the mash on this one is going to be pretty interesting. It's going to take about, normally they mash for a very long time, but today I'm going to be mashing for 45 minutes. It's going to be a step mash. I'm going to be stepping first at 62 degrees for 45 minutes, and then I'm going to bump that up to 70 degrees for 45 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and mash out at 68. And then, so let's go ahead. I'm going to start to clean off the juniper branches in some water, and just start to get them prepared and lining up the bottom of the mash tun before we wait to get the water up to 90 degrees, and it's just about there in the HLT. I'm going to be infusing this at 90 degrees for as long as it takes for the 90 degree water to settle down to my strike temperature, which is about 70 degrees. Basically what I've got here is just a bucket of water, and I'm taking the branches, the ones that I think are good enough, make sure they don't have any of the berries on them. I'm just sticking them in the water and taking off basically all of the loose bristles, if you will. So all the loose needles, any of the brown needles, I'll just take them off, so I'm just left with the freshest that's on the branch. Okay, so I'll take this branch. You can see I've already started lining up the bottom of the mash tun. And I'm basically going to fill up as much as I need to, or as much as I can, to get the false bottom to still fit on there okay. Okay, so now that the mash tun is ready to go, I've got the water all set up now. It's about 90 degrees in the HLT. So what I'm going to do is take those branches, clean them off, and then start to stick as many as I can inside there. I've only got about a gallon and a half or 2 gallons of headspace left. So basically, hopefully I can get in enough in order to get a really good infusion. So what's going to happen is the branches are actually going to stay in the HLT for the duration of the whole mash cycle, and then the water that's in the HLT is what I'll use for sparging. So that will be the juniper infused sparge water that I'll then be sparging the grains with when I start to get it over into the boil kettle. So I'm kind of fingers crossed that the element isn't going to scorch any of the branches or anything like that. Yeah, so I'm going to try and do what I can to prevent that as much as possible. But yeah, let's get started. Okay, now that the HLT is all steeping with juniper branches, the mash tun is ready to go. Time to get the malts ready. But first, gotta clean this mess up. Alright, because this is all sort of an experiment anyways, I figure, why not, let's go ahead and science the shit out of this. Because you have to think that up in the mountains, or on these farms, you know, way back in the day, centuries ago, they didn't know that when you were making beer, that you should probably have at least, you know, 50 parts per million of calcium in the water to brew, you know, to make sure that the Kveik did a very good job. So kind of have to question whether or not I'm actually going to be doing that here today. It's a very light grain bill, so should I or should I not actually acidify the mash if it needs it? Should I add calcium to the mash in order to make sure that I get at least 50 parts per million of the calcium? Should I worry about the sulfate to chloride ratio on this one? I think I am going to be concerned with my water, and I will be making pH measurements throughout the entire mash, and I'll share that with you. But the key, I think, here is to make sure that we stay as true to style. So that does mean a water profile that's very low mineral content, but I do want to hit those minimums. So I think I'm going to go ahead and target something around a Pilsner type water profile, and yeah, so I'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so while this video is not necessarily about water, I will just sort of walk through my mindset here. Using the John Palmer's Brew and Water Adjustment app. It's an Excel spreadsheet. I've selected the German Pilsner water profile, and here it sort of gives me the suggestions, and it says, okay, for this one, you know, calcium level should be between 50 and 75, magnesium up to 30 parts per million, alkalinity up to 40, sulfate between 50 and 150, same for chloride, 50 to 100, less than 100 parts per million in sodium, and residual alkalinity somewhere between -60 and 0. And this is good for beers that are, you know, between a color of about 2L to about 5 Lovibond or SRM. So down here I've got my water profile entered in. You can see. So the cations and the anions sums up very nicely. If I come down below, talk a little bit about the water source, and then here's my salt additions, and then based on these salt additions I've come up with about 2.2 grams of gypsum, about 1 gram of calcium chloride, and that will get me in the ballpark for the German Pilsner water profile. So if I come down here and I look at, here's the summary of those additions and how they're going to affect my water, it gives me 51 calcium parts per million. That puts me in between 50 and 75. Magnesium is good. The final total alkalinity is good. Interestingly enough, the sulfate to chloride ratio, you know, puts me right in the ballpark, 60 to 60, so that's a 1-to-1 ratio. Should be a pretty balanced beer, right? And the overall residual alkalinity -8 on that one. Of course, yeah, I'll talk more about residual alkalinity in another video. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. I'll talk about the or I'll deal with the sparge water later on a sort of as time goes on basis. 2.2 grams of the calcium sulfate, 1 gram of the calcium chloride. There we go. That's it. Add that into the mash. Okay, so we've been running for about 30 to 40 minutes now, and the HLT is still up at 81 degrees. You can see that sort of match down here. So let's just take a quick look. Wow, that's smelling amazing. Water's starting to turn a little bit greenish tint. That's pretty cool. Alright, so what I want to do now is just go ahead and prepare the mash, and go ahead and add in my salt additions before I add in the strike water. Uh-oh, I think we have an unhappy creature here. right about there. You can see it. There's a casualty of the brew day. Looks like he didn't make it. Brewing beer is dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. It's dangerous. Let's go ahead and just put that down there. There may be more. I remember reading an article once and it stated that beer was the #1 food or drink that had insects in it. And most of the insects come when they're harvesting the hops. But as you can tell, there are other ways to get in there. Okay, so according to Lars Marius' blog on the Morgendals farm, I believe, sorry if I butchered that name, they added tap water to the grains the night before, and then the next day they added more hot water from the tap into the grains, into the mash tun. Now what I'm going to do is basically use my meter here, my water meter, to pump cold water through the hot HLT coil and pump that into my mash tun in order to do the single infusion that way. I'm going to be doing it really slow, so hopefully I can get some good temperatures in my mash tuns to begin with, and then also to not bring down the temperature too much in the HLT. It's been going on. I've had the juniper infused for about an hour and a half now, so it's smelling really nice and pungent. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that there, and it's at 73 degrees right now, so almost I could, you know, strike that with. So I know that my strike water is going to be a little bit under, probably 45 or 50. So it's like we're going to be doing several step mashes today. So let's go ahead, do that, see where we start off, and get started. Alright, so I'm going to be doughing in with 5 gallons of water, and then I'll be sparging with 5.5 gallons from the juniper infusion. So right now I'm going to go ahead and tune in 19 liters into the meter and have that pumped through the HLT. So I've got it going in the bottom, so it's going to fill up the coil in the HLT, come out the top, come through this tube as it is now, and start to go into the bottom of the mash tun. Okay, so I had 19 liters dialed in, and it's going to be doing 19 liters. It's going in at about 10 liters per minute. You can see that my mash water was 60 or 73 when it started. It's now down to 70. Coming out of the bottom of the PID, it's reading 64. So now we're just above where we actually want to be in terms of starting the mash. But then you can see the mash is the water coming through here. You know, it's only 20 degrees. So it's gonna definitely take some time to step that up to 62, where we want to be to start off the initial 45 minutes of the 62 degree mash. Alright, so there was a bit of a mistake there where I actually was letting the water in too fast. So the result of that, of course, was the water coming into the mash tun was cooler than what it should have been. That's okay. So it's going to be more in line with the traditional putting the water in the night before and letting it sort of slow rise, and then, you know, putting in even more hot water the next day, and then turning on the heat to bring it up to 62. So looking at the time, we're going to go ahead and see how long it takes to get from about 35 degrees Celsius up to 62 degrees Celsius in the mash tun using the HLT as the heat exchanger. Okay, so now things are flowing quite nicely. Coming through the mash tun, and remember I've got those juniper branches underneath there, so it's acting as a secondary filter. It's coming out of here through the pump, back up through the pump, in through the coil in the HLT, and then coming back up into the top of the mash tun, and it's going to recirculate here for the whole time. Right now it's reading 42 degrees inside the mash tun. It's reading 58 degrees inside the HLT. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat back on in the HLT to bring that back up to 62 where we want it, and that will heat exchange the water or the wort in the mash tun and bring that up to 62 degrees as well. So let's do that. Alright, currently reading 54 inside the HLT, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that down. We want it at 62. Turn on the HLT element. You'll see start to kick on, so the element is drawing about 23 amps. And this will slowly pick up. It'll probably take about 20 minutes to get back up to 62. And then this is the temperature in the probe coming out of the mash tun, and that's reading 36 at the moment, now 37. Here you can see in the center it's actually reading 44, 45, but the PID temp is coming from this probe here. And I just thought I would note, anyone that was curious to see what's the why is there a difference between the PID reading 40 that's here coming out of the bottom versus the 48 here on the front. And the reason is because, of course, the temperature inside the HLT is 53, and so this wort coming out of here is at 53, and the cable is laying right up on top of the thermal probe, so that's why. The heat that's laying on top of the thermocoupler going in here, or the thermal probe, yeah, it's 53 coming out of the HLT, so it's reading about 48 here, and that's why it's only reading 41 now on the PID. Okay, so you can see it took about 17-18 minutes to get up to our temperature for the HLT. We want to maintain 62. In the mash tun, it's 54 and rising at this point. If we take a look at it down here, you can see that it's registering about 56, 57 here on the thermal probe. So that's pretty good. That's getting more in line with what's showing up on the PID, so that's good. It won't be long, just about 5 minutes probably to get that up to 62. And then we'll mark the timer. Okay, so there we are. Got the mash tun coming out at the bottom at 62. I've had to up the HLT to 65 to get there. I'm going to bring that down to 64, and that should be able to account for any of the loss coming through the lines. So now we can see we're definitely 62 up here as well. So everything is exactly where I want it to be. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start the mash. 75 minutes at 62 before we bump it up to the next step. Okay, so we've been maintaining 62 for the last 75 minutes, just about to hit 75 minutes. So it's been right on 64 here and 62 in the mash tun. So now I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to 70. So we'll go up to the next step, and then 70, we'll go ahead and keep that for 75 minutes. So I'll just go ahead and reset that, and there we go. Okay, so it's been sitting at 69 for a long time. It just turned over to 70. Currently, that's about 30 minutes into the ramp up. So I'm going to go ahead and reset the time on this and let the 75-minute mash at 70 begin now. And yeah, we'll come back in 75 minutes. Yeah, this is going to be a long brew day. Okay, so things got a little bit distracted in the first half of this mash. And when I checked it, it was 5.6, which is at the higher end of the scale. and generally reserved for darker beers. And since this is an extremely light beer, we probably want it closer to the 2.5, or we probably want it closer to the 5.2 range. So in this case, I've added 2.5 milliliters of phosphoric acid, and that brought it down to 5.35. And I'm kind of happy with this. I'm not going to leave it or bring it down anymore. I know that some of the yeast strains are going to drop that pH right down into the 3s. So not really worried about it too much. But just want to make the enzymes happy. Now some people not might like this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Well, I like tradition as much as the next guy. I fucking love science. So even though I'm a little bit off tradition and I'm not sticking to tradition, I am applying the science to what traditionally generally, you know, turns into science. So think about it that way. Okay, so we're actually 1 minute past the 75-minute mark, so I'm going to go ahead and raise this up to our mash out of 78 degrees. I'm actually going to put that to 80. So when this reaches 78 degrees, then we'll start to transfer all of this nice clear worts over here into the boil kettle. Okay, mash tun's at 78. Let's go ahead and start to transfer that over here into the boil kettle. Alright, nice clear wort coming into the boil kettle. I'm going to go ahead and turn down the transfer. Funniest thing I read in Lars Marius's blog is that one of the brewers he met on the farm, he was taught by his grandmother, and his grandmother told him that the speed of the wort that you should be transferring at is the same as a woman's piss. Yeah, believe it. Okay, so now that that's done, it's time to start using the sparge water. It's got all of that juniper infusion in it to start spreading the mash and sparging. I'll do that. Okay, so the most complicated thing now is just to make sure that the wort going into the boil kettle is going in at the same rate as the sparge water is going into the mash tun. So the way that I do that is here, I'll show you. A couple different ways here. Obviously, I can look at the ball valves and make sure that these two ball valves are open at the same radius. And then also is to set a point here. So I just use a simple click on this mash tun. So if it starts to drop, then I know that I'm going into the boil kettle a little bit too fast. If it starts to raise up, then I know that I'm coming out of the HLT too fast. So then it's just to monitor this flow and then adjust the valve on either side accordingly. And you can see over here I use the same technique as well to determine how much sparge water I'm going to use. So interestingly, you can see it's sort of a green tint to the water. Try and get a better shot on that later. But so I started off with 13.5 gallons, and I'm going to be using 5.5 gallons. So then I set my clip down here, just so I can monitor the level of the water. When it gets down here, then I know it's time to shut off the sparge water, because I've completed the sparge into the mash tun, and then just wait for the mash tun to finish draining into the boil kettle, and then I should be at my predetermined pre-boil volume. Okay, so a few minutes into this, boil kettle's filling up nicely. Let's go ahead and take a look at this sample. This is from the juniper infusion. Alright, here we go. That it is. That's I would say that's got some pretty good juniper infusion into it. It's got really nice juniper notes, as you would expect. Wow. I'm not going to sip it because it's still pretty hot, but there it is. Okay, so in case you're wondering, I started the HLT, putting the juniper in it about 11:30 this morning, and then now it's 5:30. It's after 5:30 actually, so it's been a good 6-hour infusion, up to 90 degrees, and then it's been maintaining that a temperature, right? You've seen it 62, and then 70, and then now 78 for the mash out for a very long period of time. The infusion came through really, really nicely, and you know, a lot of that should come into the beer. So really looking forward to seeing how this one turns out. Okay, so now that the wort is well over the element, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. I've got the PID set for 90 degrees Celsius, so what I like to do is bring up the boil kettle to 90 degrees and hold it there until I get to my pre-boil volume, and then I'll set it to 100, or actually probably 100%. Okay, so we've met our sparge volume. So now it's just to wait and let the rest of the water in the mash tun drain. See, it's about an inch and a half above the grain bed. The grains on top, you saw, they're just floating. And then we're currently at about 5 gallons on the boil volume. Yeah, getting there. So now comes the fun job of cleaning out all of this steaming hot juniper branch into a bucket and clean this sucker out. Oh my goodness, what have I done to my HLT? Absolutely destroyed. Anything for brewing beer. Okay, a little bit more noise now with the fan on, but here's a shot of the sparge water. You can see that is the color of the infusion, and sparge, I did add in 0.8 milliliters of phosphoric acid to the sparge, or to the sparge water to the HLT. So I really like having a sparge mash, a sparge pH of about 5.5. And you can see them pretty close. Alright, so we've reached our pre-boil volume of, let's see up here, 8.57 gallons. Expected a pre-boil gravity of 1058. You take a look down here, about a little bit over, probably about 8.6, 8.7 gallons. Let's check the gravity. There we go. We wanted 1058. We're right on 1058. So I'm pretty happy with that. Alright, so we're at 90 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and just hit set for about 5 seconds, go into manual mode, and then I'm going to bump that up to 100%. This is manual mode, and so then I can get 100% of the pulse. Alright, so get it to the boil. Time to crank this down to about 80. Get a nice rolling boil at 80. Let this hot break surpass. Alright, let me take care of this and then we'll come back. Did you know that the hot break material is referred to as the headache or headache, especially with Norwegian Farmhouse Ale brewers. So they'll actually skim it off and throw it away. Okay, so that's hot break. We're past it. I got a 90-minute edition here of 1 ounce of Strisel Spalt hops. These are only 2.1 alpha acid. I'll be using a total of 3 ounces here, 1 at 90, 1 at 30, and then another at 15. So let's go ahead, put these in, and set the clock. Alright, so hops are in. We're going to be doing a 90-minute boil, so Timer started. Alright, so doing a pH reading on my pre-boil wort. It's coming in at 5.46. I'll go ahead and monitor that for a few minutes. Okay, so we're approaching 60 minutes, so time for our 30-minute edition. Let's go ahead and throw that in there. Looking pretty good. Smelling pretty good. Currently at 7.5 gallons. Expected to finish about 6.7, so we're on track. Okay, just about hit the 75-minute mark. Let's go ahead and put in the 50-minute and last addition. There was another ounce of Strisel malt and also a half a Werflock tablet and half a teaspoon of yeast nutrient. Alright, so we're at 90 minutes in the boil, so I'm going to go ahead and shut off the PID, which shuts off the element. Alright, so a lot of nice big coagulated proteins. At this point we want to go ahead and chill it down. So I got the chiller already hooked up, but I need to hook up the recirculation into the whirlpool port, so we'll bring the temperature down inside the boil kettle. You can see the recirculation. So right now we're just making sure that everything is sterilized, so it's all hot coming straight out of the kettle, through all of the tubing, through the counterflow chiller, and then back up into the whirlpool port. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the water and start to chill this down. While I'm waiting for the wort to settle down, or settle out, let's go ahead and take out the a look at the yeast strains that we've got planned. Here is a Murray strain that I picked up that we believe is actually infected with lacto. See a couple interesting mounds on the top there, inside there. Don't know if you can see that. Never quite saw that before on a yeast cake. That's okay. Doesn't necessarily mean it is. I've had this starter on for the last I'm gonna give it about 28 hours. Started off with about half a teaspoon of what we believe to be a non-contaminated strain of Murray. Just took it off the stir plate about 5-10 minutes ago. You can see there's nothing settling out here. Everything is still in suspension. Can't even really say for sure if there's something there. I think most of the air bubbles could be from just agitating the wort. I don't see any CO2 coming up or any of the signs that we would hope to see for life. But I guess, I don't know, I gotta make a choice. Am I gonna use the strain that we believe might be contaminated, or use the one that's not, but it doesn't even look like there's much in there enough to use for even just a gallon? So I think I'm gonna go with this guy, and we'll take our chances. You know, there are 13.1 IBUs in this beer, so hopefully that's not unlucky, and will sort of prohibit any lactobacillus that's in any of these strains, really, so that the beer at least can be tasted for a few weeks without going too tart or sour. Next we've got the Ottawa SB strain. Looking pretty good. Stig-Stolchen as well. This one is maybe a Horndal strain, so we're going to go ahead and look into that a little bit more. got a Nornes B, which is one of the Voss strains. And of course, a very popular one, the Sigmund Jornes one over here. This is also a Voss strain. Now, for all 4 of these, I will be running these in the fermenter at 37 degrees is my target. Now, I know that Murray does okay there, but it seems to be doing better at normal fermentation temperatures or even colder, possibly lager temperatures. So I think Murray I'm going to keep out of the group that I have at the 37 degrees Celsius fermentation range, and just let that one go ahead and ferment at a normal 18 degrees Celsius. Okay, so behind me you can see I've lined up all of the carboys that are now filled. I've put tape on each one of the bottlenecks in order to signal which yeast it is I'm putting into it. And then in front of them you can see the yeasts associated with each one. I went ahead and took one of the big containers and transferred basically enough for this little gallon batch. It's actually probably more than enough, but I'm going to go ahead and use it anyway. So I've got one for Ottawa SB. I've got the, okay Ottawa, stay still. I've got one for the Stig Stalgen, which is possibly the Horndal strain. I've got the Nornes B, which is a Voss strain. Here I've got the Sigmund Jornes, which is also a Voss strain. And then here I've got the Murray. The Murray has been a little bit, not really sure if I want to use the new sample or not. And the reason why is because if you look at it now, it's been setting for probably a good, probably close to an hour. And underneath it, it's got very, very little sediment. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back on the stir plate. Before I do that, actually, we could go ahead and take a pH reading, and then we can take a gravity check and see how much it's changed since yesterday. But before we get to that, let me go ahead and we'll do that after in conclusion. But right now I just want to go ahead and first, before I inoculate them, I'm going to give each one of those about 30-second shot of pure oxygen, and then I'll pitch the yeast. Okay, so I did just dose them all with oxygen. Sorry I didn't get a chance to see that. The camera didn't start. But anyways, doesn't matter. They've all been oxygenated. Now it's time to go ahead and pitch, so I'm going to do it. We'll start off with the out of Espy. This one is not really looking like it settles out very quickly, and that's in contrast to this one, the Stig Stolzen, right beside it. So yeah, not very flocculent, that one. But let's go ahead, just shake it up a little bit. And I'm probably only going to pitch half of that. I'm going to go ahead and just try that. Only pitched about a third of it. Now they're pitched. Now the Murray's going to stay about room temperature, 18 degrees Celsius. And then the rest of them I'm going to wrap inside a heat belt and try and get them up to 37 degrees Celsius and see how well they ferment over the course of the next couple days. Okay, forget about the 2 beers up here. That's for another video. But looking at the sample from the yeast starter for the new Murray sample, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this. When I start off my wort samples, they're usually between 1033 and 1035, and I'm looking at about 1035 here. So I don't see a drop in the gravity, but what I do find interesting is that the pH is down to 4.66. And I know that this is a little bit unusual for starters. My starters are usually, from tap water, boiled, add the wort, pitch the whatever, and see what happens. The pH at that level is usually, upwards of at least 5.8 to 6.5. So to see it at 4.6 is really interesting, but yeah, still not underneath 4.5. I'm not going to take a sample and taste it. It does not smell sweet though, or it does not smell tart in any way. Let's turn this around. Okay, so the new sample that was shared with me yesterday, here it is. Taking a whiff of it, it doesn't smell anything tart. It smells clean, it smells fresh, if that's anything. Looking at it now, I can actually see bubbles rising, so it does look like there is some sort of activity in it. Don't know if you can capture that. It's quite fine. But yeah, like I said before, I'm going to go ahead and put that back on the starter, on the stir plate. Let that go for another 24 hours and see where it's at then. Maybe it's just, so small that it's just really not giving a good visual representation at this time. It's just going through its stages, beginning stages. So yeah, like I said, I'll put it back, check back in on it in another video. Okay, so here these guys are all rolled up in a heating cable, plugged into a STC 1000, and got Murray over here all alone in the corner. But let's go ahead and wrap this up. Alright, so as you can see, that was a long brew day. That was a 12-hour brew day for 5 gallons of beer. Do I think it was worth it? Probably not. I'll never get that time back. But the beer's not done fermenting yet. Let's go ahead and take a quick look 12 hours later. Okay, so looking at the next day, they're all doing really well. Stigstallion's got a nice little Krausen on it. Auto Espe as well. It's got quite a bit of activity. The Sigmund Uranus is doing really well. Interesting. Some movement in there around the top. It's an interesting convection. Looks like we had a bit of a blowout over the course of the night on the Nornitz, but otherwise looking well. The temperature was at 37 when I came in. I took off the top blanket that I had on here, just giving these guys a little bit of love. You can see the belt there in there. So yeah, this is after about 12 hours, maybe 13. So looking pretty good. If we look at the Murray, actually it's got reverse pressure on it, and it doesn't look like there's any activity on it whatsoever. And it's about 18 degrees here inside this room. So I might have to give that a little bit of warmth and see if we can get that one going as well. So that's the beer fermenting. Is it going to be worth it? I don't know yet. The Murray strain, I had some difficulties with the yeast, as you saw. So actually today, the yeast that I had on the stir plate is actually showing a lot better. It's much more cloudy, more activity, and I will bump that up, but I may actually pitch that into the current carboy for Murray that doesn't seem to have any activity yet. And so we'll see where that goes. I'm really looking forward to see the results of this experiment and see which of the yeasts I like the best and how I can sort of play with them and maybe blend them into the future. It's definitely going to be interesting. So I want to go ahead and give a special shout out to the guys over at Eik Tid. They really showed what a community is really all about by sharing the Kveik with me so that I can do this experiment. And give you a little bit of a insight is that I will be spending a brew day with them, and we're gonna go and pick some juniper and we're gonna brew on their system, and they ferment in barrels. So that's gonna be very interesting to check out, and I'll make sure to bring that to the channel and share it with all of you. So thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate you stopping by and watching the brew day video. We'll see you next time. Cheers.